Welcome and good afternoon. My name is Kamish Orr, and today it's time for the All-Star announcements. So today is where we're going to be announcing the starting, not only the starting players for the American and National League teams in the Baseball Maelstrom All-Star game, but we'll also be announcing the reserves as well. So remember the starters were all voted on through a Google form or a Google poll, I should say. And so thank you for those of you who voted for that for the starters. And then I've rounded out the rest of the roster with the reserves. So we'll have 2 players at each position, including DH, and 9 pitchers. So I will be going through those now. So first up, we have at catcher for the American League. We'll start with the American League. Starting catcher will be Mickey Cochrane. Mickey Cochrane is batting .309 this year with a .371 on base percentage and .568 slugging. He has hit 4 homers for the Oakland Jacks and is definitely one of the leaders. Next up for the American League at first base, we have Rod Carew. Rod Carew, also playing for the Oakland Jacks this year. He is batting .341 with a .383 on base percentage and .648 slugging. 6 homers this year. He has really demonstrated his value to the team, and looks forward to continuing that success in the All-Star game. At second base for the American League, we have Lou Whitaker. Lou Whitaker is a member of the Detroit Rockets. Remember, the Detroit Rockets are the team made up of non-Hall of Famers. Whitaker's only batting .256 this year. However, he's doing well enough. Has a .344 on base percentage, and so he was kind of a standout at a kind of a weak position in the American League, second base. But he'll look forward to joining the team and doing what he can to give them a win here in the All-Star game. At short for the American League, we have Alex Rodriguez. Alex Rodriguez is also on the Detroit Rockets. He is doing much better than Lou Whitaker batting-wise. He's hitting .347 with a .436 on base percentage and a .755 slugging percentage. He leads both leagues in homers with 9. So he will be one to watch out for here in the upcoming All-Star game. Next, we go to third base. And the starting third baseman for the American League is George Brett. George Brett, the Oakland Jacks third baseman. He's hitting .345 with a .389 on base percentage and .619 slugging. He's hit 4 homers this year and has definitely stood out there at third base. Looking at the infield positions, we have 3 Oakland Jacks sluggers in there and 2 Detroit Rockets in the infield. Let's head to the outfield. And the starting left fielder for the American League All-Stars is, this is a no-brainer, Ted Williams. Ted Williams is batting .395 heading into the All-Star break with a .531 on base percentage and a .756 slugging. He has 8 homers, just 1 behind Alex Rodriguez. He's walked 26 times already this year and has just been dominating offensively for the Boston Splinters. He is leading in nearly every category in the Maelstrom, every offensive category. So definitely a no-brainer to have him starting for the All-Stars. Next, we go to center field, and the starting center fielder for the American League All-Stars is Rickey Henderson. Rickey Henderson's hitting .312 with a .407 on base and a .452 slugging. He only has 3 homers this year, but he has 5 stolen bases so far. A little low for Rickey, but definitely a standout there in center field, and probably going to be leading off in the lineup too, most likely. Next, we head to right field. And the starting right fielder is Tony Oliva. He's hitting .349 with a .398 on base percentage and a .605 slugging. Just 4 homers, but he has done enough to show himself there in the outfield. So with that, all 3 starting outfielders are Boston Splinters. All 3 of them with the Boston Splinters. Next, we head to the DH. And DHing for the American League this year in the All-Star game is Hank Greenberg. Hank Greenberg from the Oakland Jacks. He is hitting .337 with a .409 on base percentage and a .663 slugging. He has 7 homers. He's walked 13 times, 8 doubles. Definitely a threat out there for the offense. So that rounds out your American League starting players for the starting lineup. The actual lineups won't be set yet until the actual All-Star game, but just gives you an idea of who the starters are. The starting pitcher for the American League is going to be Gaylord Perry. Gaylord Perry, starter for the Boston Splinters. He's only 3-2 this year. However, he has one of the lowest ERAs in the American League, 2.8 ERA. He has been pretty dominant as a starter, despite those 2 losses, and definitely a standout. Opponents are only batting .253 against him, which is actually pretty good here for the American League, which is an offensive-heavy league. And so we'll be interested to see how he does. Rounding out the rest of the American League, we have at catcher with the Detroit Rockets, Bill Freehan. At first base, also from the Detroit Rockets, Dick Allen. At second base, Joe Gordon from the Oakland Jacks. At shortstop, also from the Oakland Jacks, Robin Yount. At third base, for the New York Swats, Wade Boggs at third base. At left field, from the Detroit Rockets, Bobby Veach. At center field, from the Oakland Jacks, Joe DiMaggio. At right field, from the Detroit Rockets, Ichiro Suzuki. And at DH, also from the Detroit Rockets, Negro Leaguer Charlie Blackwell. That rounds out the each of the position players that will be in the American League All-Star team. Now for the pitchers. Rounding out the pitching staff for the American League, we have from the Oakland Jacks, Bert Blyleven. From the Boston Splinters, Jim Palmer. From the Detroit Rockets, Roger Clemens. From the New York Swats, Nolan Ryan. From the Boston Splinters, Pedro Martinez. From the Oakland Jacks, Jim Cott. From the New York Swats, Satchel Paige. And finally, from the Detroit Rockets, we have Tom Henke, who will be slotted in as their closer. Each of those pitchers will probably get about an inning of work in the All-Star game, assuming it doesn't go to extra innings. So we'll really be looking forward to seeing how all of those players do. Now let's head over to the National League. The starting catcher for the National League is Gary Carter from the Houston Hoots. Carter was batting .256 so far this year. He has 5 homers for a .478 slugging percentage and does have an on-base percentage of just .281. However, catcher is kind of a weaker position for the National League, and he's definitely a standout there. Starting at first base for the National League All-Stars is Houston Hoots' Jeff Bagwell. Bagwell leading the team in offense. He's batting .327 with a .375 on-base percentage and a .644 slugging. He does have 8 homers, one of the top, if not the top, in the National League. Next up, we head over to second base. And at second base, starting for the National League All-Stars, we have Joe Morgan. Joe Morgan just hitting .260 with a .345 on-base percentage, but does have 10 walks to 6 strikeouts and 7 stolen bases, so he'll be a key player there, probably near the top of the order. Lineups aren't quite set yet, of course, as I mentioned. Next up, we have the starting shortstop for the National League, Troy Tulowitzki. He's hitting .290 with a .329 on-base percentage and a .406 slugging. He has just 1 homer this year, but has definitely shown himself defensively and has some key hits on the offense to stand out there at short for amongst all National League players. Next up at third base, and this is interesting, the voted on starter for the National League is Eddie Mathews. Eddie Mathews just hitting .259 with a .377 on base, but a .707 slugging. He has 8 homers. However, he did suffer an injury just a few games ago, so he will be missing the All-Star game, unfortunately. And his replacement to start the game will be his teammate, actually, Tony Perez. Tony Perez has just limited time so far this season, but in that limited time, he's hitting .342. So he's definitely a standout and a good replacement there for Eddie Mathews at third base. Next, we head over to left field. And the starting left fielder for the National League All-Stars is Stan Musial. He's hitting .300 with a .600 slugging percentage. He has 8 homers and has definitely been fun to watch this year and a worthy starter there at left. In center field is his teammate, Oscar Charleston from the Negro Leagues. Charleston's hitting .324 with a .410 on-base percentage and a .490 slugging percentage. And again, 7 stolen bases for Charleston, so just another speedy standout there for the National League. Starting right fielder for the National League will be their teammate Tony Gwynn. Gwynn's hitting .371 with a .434 on-base percentage, just a .449 slugging percentage. But, Gwynn's not really known for his power. He hasn't hit a homer this year. But he does have 4 stolen bases and has definitely been showing his ability to get those key hits when it matters most. So there we have it. Just like the American League, all 3 National League starters in the outfield are from the St. Louis Wizards. Next up, we have the DH. Also from the St. Louis Wizards, and that is Larry Walker. Larry Walker's hitting .341 with a .402 on-base percentage and a .637 slugging. And he will round out the starters, the starting position players and DH for the National League. Starting pitcher for the National League this year is also on the St. Louis Wizards. It's Robin Roberts. Roberts is 3-1 this year with a .211 ERA. Opponents have only hit about .206 against him, which is probably the best in the National League, if not the entire Maelstrom. The St. Louis Wizards have so many top pitchers that it was hard to choose who was going to be the starter for the National League All-Stars. So now let's take a look at the other players who are rounding out the National League lineup, or roster, I should say. Backup catcher from the St. Louis Wizards, Ted Simmons. First baseman from the LA Dynamos, Johnny Mize. Second baseman from the Houston Hoots, Ryan Sandberg. Shortstop, also from the Houston Hoots, Arky Vaughn. Backup third baseman will be from the St. Louis Wizards, Ron Santo. Backup left fielder from the Chicago Docks is Pete Rose. Backup center fielder from the LA Dynamos, Willie Mays. The backup right fielder, also from the LA Dynamos, Chuck Klein. And the DH from the Chicago Docks, Barry Bonds. Rounding out the rest of the pitching staff will be, joining Robin Roberts, Sandy Koufax from the LA Dynamos, Tom Seaver from the Houston Hoots, Juan Marichal from the St. Louis Wizards, Steve Carlton, also from the St. Louis Wizards. And we next have Tom Glavine from the LA Dynamos. Pete Alexander, also from the Los Angeles Dynamos. From the Chicago Docks, Kent Tekulve. And closing the game for the National League All-Stars will be Goose Gossage, also from the LA Dynamos. So a couple key players that were left off the roster, unfortunately. In the American League, one glaringly obvious player left off was Adrian Beltre. Beltre's hitting .376 with a .398 on-base percentage and .587 slugging with 6 homers. However, he is not on the team, surprisingly, and that's because the New York Swats, Wade Boggs was added on there instead to give the New York Swats another player on the team. New York is in last place in the American League, and they don't have very much representation on the team. 2 pitchers, Nolan Ryan and Satchel Paige, and Wade Boggs is the only position player. So unfortunately, Adrian Beltre was left off the roster to make room for Wade Boggs. Also absent is Babe Ruth. And once again, New York Swats kind of underrepresented. They've had a tough year this year, and Babe Ruth is no exception to that. Ruth is just hitting .248 with a .495 slugging. He does have 7 homers. However, he just is not hitting that well, and wasn't quite good enough to bump anybody else off of the roster. On the pitching side of things, left off was Dan Quisenberry with the Detroit Rockets. Quisenberry has just a .75 ERA, which is really crazy. However, he has only pitched 12 innings, and despite only allowing 1 earned run in those 12 innings and 8 hits, he did not make the team, as there were just so many other great pitchers to choose from. On the National League side, we had also a couple players that probably should have made it but were left off. And one of them is the Los Angeles Dynamos' Cristobal Torriente. He's hitting .329 with a .358 on-base percentage and .397 slugging. However, he was left off the team, playing often as the DH actually this year in the National League, and just wasn't good enough to make it with Larry Walker and Barry Bonds as DHs for the National League. Also left off the roster, very surprisingly, is the St. Louis Wizards closer, Bruce Sutter. Sutter has 8 saves, leading the entire Maelstrom. However, he does have 4.32 ERA, which is not very good for the National League, and does have a blown save. Now, if you remove that blown save, his ERA actually compares pretty favorably with the rest. However, there were just so many other good relievers that he was left off the roster. The other thing I just want to note is that I do plan to broadcast or at least do a live. I don't know if it'll be a live play, but I'll have me playing the game, the All-Star game. I'll put that up, so that's a little bit different. I haven't had any actual play videos, so I do plan to put that up when I play that. And so for all of you that are interested to see how I play, what my setup looks like, that kind of thing, I'm sure you'll find that interesting. Prior to the All-Star game, though, I am doing a home run derby, and the players that will be participating have already been announced. The American League players in the home run derby will be, and this is in order of seeding. So Dick Allen gets the number 1 seed. Ted Williams gets the number 2. Alex Rodriguez gets the number 3. And Joe DiMaggio gets the number 4. Those will be the 4 American League representatives in the home run derby. I actually seeded them according to home runs per plate appearance, so to make it a little bit more even. In the National League, the number 1 seed is Jeff Bagwell. Number 2, Stan Musial. Number 3, Johnny Mize. And number 4, Barry Bonds. So those will be the 8 players participating in the home run derby. That will be another video. I will do that. I will video that so everybody can see how I went about setting up a home run derby and what the results were, and kind of watch along with that one. That's where we will leave things for now. Thank you again to those who voted. Thanks to all of you who are following the league and watching. Love to hear your comments down below. And until next time, have a great evening.